everybody remembers in October of 2018, we took it on the chin in Southwest Georgia. Hurricane Michael was impactful, and yet Georgia and Florida both impacted. Georgia took a slightly different approach towards fire and forestry, and we're going to be doing a retrospective on what's happened since then to really follow up on fire and reforestation efforts. We've got a co-presentation from Brad Gregory and Scott Griffin. Brad's the Area 6 Fire Management Officer with the Georgia Forestry Commission. Area 6 is consists of the 16 counties in South Georgia that runs from Tifton and Albany north to Americus. And those areas both are a hub for prescribed fire, and then also took the brunt of the storm. And then Scott Griffin is chief of the Forest Management Department, providing direction and forest management services that supported productive forest landscape. And much of his 27-year career with GFC has been spent working as a management forester around the state. They will transition together from one to the other in the middle of the talk. There will not be a time for Q&A, but if you do have questions, please put them in the Q&A box, and Shannon and I will try to get those to Brad and Scott after the presentation. So, Brad, it's all yours.
Good afternoon. Glad to be able to join in with you today. I'll be sharing some information on the impacts that Hurricane Michael had on forestry in Southwest Georgia. We'll take a quick look back at Hurricane Michael. Then we'll talk about some of GFC's initial response and some of our relief efforts. And we'll also take a look in the influences that Hurricane Michael could potentially have on wildfire suppression, as well as prescribed burning in the impacted areas over the next 6 or 7 years. Hurricane Michael made landfall as a Category 5 storm on October 10th of 2018. Wind speeds were recorded up to 162 miles an hour near Mexico Beach, Florida. The eye of Hurricane Michael passed into Southwest Georgia as a Cat 3 storm around 6 p.m. that afternoon. And we had winds recorded up to 115 miles per hour in Donaldsonville, and winds extended 70 plus miles per hour in portions of central Georgia. This was devastating to our timber, as well as our cotton crops and pecan orchards. Michael became the first major hurricane to hit Georgia since 1898. As you look at the two maps, it's very interesting to me, the correlation between the National Weather Service wind gust map on the left and the timber damage map that was produced by Georgia Forestry Commission that's on the right. GFC Air Resources, as well as our local foresters and rangers on the ground, were used to determine the areas that had the most damage. Damages were reported across 2.4 million acres in southwest and south central Georgia. Most of the timber stands in southwest corner of the state resembled a photograph that was taken by one of our rangers. There were 38 million tons of wood that was damaged or destroyed that day or that night. And of that 38 million tons, 54% pine, 46% hardwood. To put that kind of into perspective, that was about 1.5 million truckloads of timber, or $763 million lost. GFC initial response efforts consisted of logistical support. We provided pre-storm logistical support, which consisted of moving cots and water and other essential supplies to support community preparation and emergency shelters. Some of the post-storm logistical support, we had 150 of our personnel that were engaged with the incident management team, as well as chainsaw and tractor strike teams to help open roadways to allow emergency access and power restoration to the most devastated areas in Southwest Georgia. And several of these counties did not have a passable road. Some of our rangers that responded just after the storm had to saw their own way out of their property to respond to the initial relief efforts. And some of them was away from home up to 14 days. GFC's Type 3 incident management team was set up in Tifton. This team worked directly with the Department of Transportation, Department of Natural Resources, as well as Georgia Search and Rescue to help coordinate overall relief efforts. A few weeks following the storm, there was a couple of programs created by Governor Nathan Deal and the Georgia General Assembly that provided much needed aid to landowners in the affected counties. You'll be hearing more specific details about these programs coming up next from Scott Griffin. What I'd like to share about these programs is how they fit into our overall strategy of wildfire suppression, as well as prescribed burning in the affected areas. 200 of GFC Rangers statewide were involved in the restoration project, and this is about 2/3 of our Rangers workforce. There were 10,000 tractor hours documented, and those hours do not include travel time or overnight stays. Overall hours would have been much greater. Based on the 10,000 hours of tractor time, we estimate that about 15,000 miles of fire breaks and forest roads were cleared. And there was no cost to the approximately 1,300 landowners that were served in the 28 counties that was declared a state of emergency. Days following the storm, GFC fire managers began feeling that there would be an increased level of concern for wildfire suppression in the impacted areas. Some of the concerns were property owners trying to burn storm debris without proper safety measures in place, therefore increasing the potential for fire starts. We also felt that the sheer volume of dead and down fuels was likely to contribute to the number, intensity, and duration of wildfires over the next 6 or 7 years. Typically in Georgia, there's about 4 to 7 tons per acre of available fuel, but unmanaged hurricane impacted areas could have up to a 10-fold increase in the amount of fuel on the ground, increasing the severity of the fires. Accumulations of large cured fuels could increase difficulty in fire suppression. And we as fire managers anticipated a substantial surge in the difficulty of suppressing wildfires in both the wildlands and wildland urban interface as a result of concentrated debris. And as time goes on, large tracts of young planted pines that could result in faster moving fires, leading to an increased danger for our firefighters. Increase in equipment damage and repairs, as well as an increase of resources and man hours would lead to an increased cost. Some of the wildfire suppression strategies that we had in place included moving heavy equipment from Southeast Georgia to the counties with the most down timber. We moved these tractors in anticipation of increased numbers, as well as an increase in the severity of the wildfires. GFC owns 2 seats, which is single engine air tankers. These planes are capable of dropping up to 500 gallons of water or retardant directly on or just ahead of a fast advancing wildfire. The ability to knock down or cool down the head of the fire aids our ground resources in hooking around or getting fire lines established in front of the fire, helping to stop the advancement. These 2 planes were staged in or adjacent to the most devastated areas for a quick response. Our largest state-owned tractor, which is a John Deere 1050, was moved up to Lowndes County in an effort to minimize the response time to the most devastated areas. This large tractor is very valuable when trying to push through large down timber. Another pre-suppression strategy used was quickly implementing the forest road and fire break restoration project, which allowed debris removal from existing fire breaks and forest roads, therefore allowing fire suppression equipment better access. The forest debris management program that allowed debris removal from damaged stands, therefore reducing the amount of fuels. While conducting understory burns in the impacted areas, some things that you may want to consider would be the importance of increased planning, consider the amount of fuel in the stand and adjust your burn accordingly. Snags near the fire line as well as in the interior of the burn unit. Concentrated debris near the fire lines. Consider the potential for spotting across the line. Smoke, you would want to consider longer durations of smoke as well as smoke further downwind from the burn unit. And increased in smoldering duration, that would lead to increased monitoring as well as increased potential for escape. That brings us to my last slide for today. Overall, the impacts from Hurricane Michael on prescribed burning in the impacted areas are inconclusive. As you look at the two graphs, you'll notice that the burn acres in fiscal year 2019 was down by approximately 228,000 acres from the previous year, but we did receive over 62 inches of rainfall during that same period. We feel that the increased amount of rain as well as the increased activity in cleaning up storm debris was the two leading factors in the decreased acres burned for 2019. If you notice, FY 20 and 21 have both shown an increase in silviculture acres burned in the impacted areas. Our silviculture acres include hazard reduction, wildlife management, as well as site prep. In closing, 3 years after Hurricane Michael, GFC feels like we're in a lot better situation now than where we were at in the spring and summer of 2019. This is due in part by receiving adequate rainfall to help reduce the number of wildfires, along with the tremendous effort in debris removal put forth by you, our landowners and our land managers. My contact information is on the screen. I'll be glad to follow up with any questions that you may have. And the best way to contact me is by email. I'll now turn it over to Scott Griffin.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Glad to be with you today. You know, the last time I gave a Hurricane Michael talk, I thought it was going to be the last time, but it just keeps coming back. It was such a significant storm and event that it is definitely worthy to talk about. So what I'm going to do today, or what I was tasked with, was to talk about some of the restoration programs that were offered. You know, what specifically was provided or promoted as far as reforestation, what kind of impact those programs had. And then secondly, what portion of Hurricane Michael footprint has been restored. So, you know, looking at acres replanted, acres restored, acres with passive management, you know, how much of the land was converted to other uses. So, you know, I'll take a stab at that. Some of those questions we really don't have a good handle on at this point, but I'll present some information that I found to you, or that I found that you may find useful. So if we're, you know, looking at programs and what was offered, one of the more significant programs was the Georgia Farm Recovery Block Grant. $347 million came to Georgia, and you can see there all the different players that were involved in this: beef, fruit, dairy, pecans, poultry, all those. We had several meetings with Georgia Department of Ag. They were the ones leading this effort, and all the parties in those with interest in those different commodities were at the table, and we all decided, you know, who needed what. And, you know, I think forestry came out real favorable with our meetings. And you can see some of the numbers there. I think one of the key numbers is the $68 million. That's the money that has went to forest landowners in Georgia from the block grant. There was a couple of different kinds of applications. There was a third-party application which paid less money per acre, but it required less documentation. And then the comprehensive timber, which paid 80% of the fair market value loss, was where most of the dollars were, but did require that documentation. But you know, a big chunk of money went to those forest landowners. There was no reforestation requirement for the block grant, but you know, no doubt that 68 million is going to allow those forest landowners to put those lands back together, to encourage them to keep it in forests, and to move forward with that next crop of trees. The hurricane, another program, and these next programs are state funded programs, and Brad mentioned this one a little earlier. The legislature set aside $20 million total. That was funding the fire breaks and roads project, as well as this forest debris management program. And this was just to manage debris across forested landscapes. And, you know, we were interested in protecting forest health, of course, reducing that wildfire risk across the landscape. The breaks and roads were very helpful to allow our firefighters to get in there in case of fires in the future. But these were actually cleaning up across the landscape. There was, you know, would allow those to be reforested or whatever is needed. You see orchard production on there as well. Pecans were actually part of this program. So that posed some challenges for us in forestry, trying to mix that in, especially since pecans had a federal program that also did the same thing. So there was some challenges there, but all in all, a well thought out program. You can see our total numbers that we serve: 723 different contracts. We were able to clean up 115,000 acres with a cost share of almost $11 million. You see the map there. You see all the work that was done. This was not done with state equipment. These were landowners, even they were doing it with their own equipment, or they were hiring private contractors to do this. And the payments came after they finished the cleanup. So just a tremendous amount of work done across the landscape to prevent wildfires, to improve the health of those forests and allow those areas to be reforested. This now I'll show a video that kind of highlights the work that we did with the forest debris management program. We put this together to highlight our state legislature and the work that they did. The state response to Hurricane Michael was unprecedented. We had this program, and then the next program, the tax credit program that I'll tell you about, was even larger, and just a great outreach to forest landowners. And I think it shows just how much our state legislatures understand the importance of forestry to the economy and the environment of Georgia. So I'm going to show this video now. It's about 2.5 minutes. And so here we go. On the evening of October 10th, we knew Hurricane Michael was bearing down on Georgia, but we had no idea it was going to cause the damage that it did, with winds over 100 miles per hour, and ended up all the way in between 2.4 million acres, resulting in over $750 million worth of timber damage.
The anxiety that myself and everybody in the forest industry had, it was just incredible.
The first person that I called for help was Steve, the county forester, early county forester.
Right after the storm, I made myself available as much as possible to landowners. When they called, I tried to answer their questions.
Within a month, the state legislature passed a critical bill. This bill allocated $20 million to Georgia landowners to aid in the cleanup of forest debris.
This was not federal money, this was state money that their legislature had earmarked for them to clean up and mitigate these problems across the landscape.
The main goals of the program were to gain access to forest land for landowners, to prevent catastrophic wildfires, as well as aid in forest restoration.
It costs a great deal to have site prep done.
You know, you pretty much get into gear thinking about, you know, how we're going to get started, how we're going to clean it up, how we're going to salvage.
Creating the program, we put a lot of effort into ensuring checks and balances so that we're responsibly using the taxpayers' dollar, but also creating a program that helps the Georgia forest landowners.
If it hadn't been for the state legislators, then the Forestry Commission would have been hamstrung. They couldn't have offered this assistance without their support.
You know, we have a great forest industry within Georgia, the best in any state there is. and they all pulled together as one.
When I look at that property now and see that it's been burned, I've taken care of the site prep and all of that, and then the seedlings have been planted, it fills me with gratitude.
All of my farming friends in the community and all of us, for the most part, make decisions and do things based on hope.
I'm hopeful for a full restoration of everything that was destroyed and damaged by Hurricane Michael. And our landowners have demonstrated their commitment to overcoming this natural disaster, and it gives me tremendous hope for the future of forestry in the state of Georgia.
So the next program, this is a state program as well. The state timber tax credit program, landowners got up to $400 per acre in a tax credit, which is very substantial in that, you know, it's not a deduction, it's a credit. So they either get it knocked off of the tax that they owe, or it comes to them in a payment. This did have a replanting or restoration requirement. They had to do that in the same county in which the timber was destroyed or damaged. Very well thought out by our legislature and all the different requirements in the law and how it all worked. And this came out just a month or so after the hurricane. So great thanks goes out to our legislators for what they did there for forestry. Again, looking at the big number there at the bottom, almost $80 million in tax credits have been pre-approved. Those are coming in now as landowners complete their replanting or their restoration, then they can claim their tax credits. Those are payments are coming out as we speak. So average application was 368 acres with $709 value loss per acre was the average. The last program is a federally funded program through the Farm Service Agency, the Emergency Forest Restoration Program. This program is designed to restore areas, forests impacted by natural disaster. You see some of the numbers there. We wrote this, these are our numbers, the Forestry Commission numbers, the work that we did, and we're the technical service provider for this program. We wrote 622 reforestation plans. That's nearly 67,000 acres, a little over $12 million in cost share. To date, we have certified about 31% of the contracts, or 195 contracts, and about 25% of these acres have been reforested. There's still actually applications that are being submitted to our foresters, and we're still writing some plans and still working to get some of these to get these completed. So, you know, skipping ahead to the second question there, as far as, you know, what has been restored, you know, how much of the footprint has been restored, how much needed to be restored, how much has been converted to other uses. And those are some big questions that I don't have a great answer for today. I think we'll learn more in time. But we had a big footprint. We had a 2.4 million acre footprint. And the challenge for us is a lot of that footprint was moderate to light damage. You can see there on the map, the lighter colors are the lighter amounts of damage, with about 2 million acres in the moderate to light. And you know, the light probably doesn't need to be reforested. The moderate, some of it does, some of it doesn't, depending on the situation. We're dealing with 400,000 acres of severe and catastrophic damage. So we estimate there was somewhere around 400,000 to about 1 million acres that probably needed to be reforested. So I looked at some numbers and pulled some things to try to indicate, you know, what was going on the ground. And just looking at site prep burns, roughly 2 years before the hurricane, we burned about 62,000 acres, about 1,800 permits. And then after the hurricane, site prep burns went up about 20,000 acres. The number of permits jumped greatly, you know, right, more than 2,000 permits more during that time period than the 2 years before the hurricane. So, you know, that shows some increased site prep burning activity for sure. Took a look at a snapshot at seedling sales in Decatur County, which is one of our more severely hit counties. 17,000 seedlings the planting season before the hurricane. And then we looked at 2019, 2020 planting season, just because nobody was reforesting, right after the hurricane. So that's a year after the hurricane, that planting season, and a huge jump, over 100,000 seedlings more sold during that year than that year before. So again, it shows that areas are being reforested and replanted at a significant portion. I've talked to our foresters down in that area and gotten observations from them. And they say basically the uplands, the areas around the fields, those areas are being replanted. Not seeing a whole lot of conversion. In fact, they've seen some, fields being planted in trees through other programs. And a lot of the bottomland areas remained as is. They were wet. They couldn't be salvaged. And so those areas are just going to be left to naturally regenerate. FIA data is going to be our biggest hope in kind of getting that actual information of what is happening on the ground. All the FIA plots in the area there in the footprint of the hurricane have been revisited to do a damage assessment. This was a special visit where they went out to measure the down woody material on the sites, on the plots. All this work's been completed, and what they did is they ran a straight line across the plot, and they measured everything from twigs all the way up to tree trunks. And so they're getting an idea of what kind of woody material is on the ground. So we'll have that report soon. I hope by the end of the year, is what I'm hearing. We'll certainly get a better picture of what's going on in that area after our FIA foresters complete this plot cycle. I talked with our manager today, and it's the FIA plots. We measure all the plots on a 5-year cycle. So we'll visit an entire area and do an entire group of plots every 5 years for the whole state. So it's a continual cycle.
2 minutes, Scott.
Okay, continual cycle of plots. And once we complete this next cycle, he's thinking, or this actual next year, there'll be enough data to produce some analysis of before and after. So we can see what's going on those plots. When they revisit the plots, have they been reforested? Have they been left alone to naturally regenerate and more passive management? Have they been converted into some sort of other use, an agricultural field or whatever? So we will definitely get a better idea of what's going on in that area. One thing the forester did mention is that there's some really good prices down in that area, or the areas surrounding the footprint of the storm. A lot of that's got to do with weather, but a lot of it is some supply issues down in that part of the world where some of the damage occurred, and that it could be helping certainly with prices with those who have timber remaining. So yeah, that's just a follow-up of Hurricane Michael, of the programs that were delivered. Like I said, just an unprecedented amount of assistance went to forest landowners in the area. I'll kind of close with this thought is we had a meeting there in Bainbridge just after the storm, and I spoke with one landowner, and the quote from the landowner is, "I never want to see another pine tree again." And that, part of our deal there was we probably went too soon with a meeting. It was only a couple of weeks after the hurricane, and we were there with kind of technical information, and that wasn't as well received by the group as I understand that, but I think what's happened now is people have, you know, things have settled down. They do see the importance of forestry. They certainly receive the assistance with the programs, and forests are being restored in that area and replanted. So, like I said in the video, you know, there's great hope in that area and great hope for forestry still in that part of the state. So, but thanks for having me today, and that's all I got.
Great. Thank you very much, Brad and Scott. What a tremendous story of resilience, you know, and one of our most important frequently burned landscapes, you know, in the country, really. So